Yeah, yeah. So what did you learn about grief, talking to 60 different people? What's the, I know it's a big, broad question, but people suffer and have their own grief experience. It's unique to each person.
I think so. I think there's a lot of similarities as well, but I guess, to be honest, when I first started interviewing people, I think deep down I was hoping they might give me some answer. And it turns out there isn't one, but everyone finds their way eventually. But I think I just learned it's hard for everyone, and a lot harder than I couldn't say I'd even imagined it, because when Paul was sick, I didn't contemplate the fact that that we could lose him. It was too hard to go down that track, so I didn't want to think about us losing him. So I think the main things I learnt from all of the people in the book are that everyone struggles with it and everyone finds a way eventually, but it takes a lot of time, and perhaps more time than I certainly would have imagined myself.
So Life After, the title, we were drawn to it because we'd developed our series based upon grief stories and the stories after the loss. So what brought you to that name?
I think it's partly a play on the term afterlife, but I really wanted to focus on not so much what happened to people, and there are some people in there that have faced really unimaginable trauma, but I didn't want to focus too much on what had occurred. There's an introduction to each person's piece that explains what has happened, but it's really about their grief and what came after.
Right. Yes, give us some examples of the people, because you're right, there's some sort of examples of trauma there which you'd think that people could never overcome. And I guess that's another point, that you never do overcome grief, you just move through it and you're a different person on the other end. Is that basically what happens, Evonne?
I think so. I mean, there are some pretty extreme examples in that book. I guess the most extreme example would be the Goldbergs, Abe and Sesha Goldberg. They survived the Holocaust, so that's clearly at the most extreme end of the spectrum, you'd have to say. And I was inspired by every single person in this book, but I spent a lot of time with Mr. and Mrs. Goldberg, and every time I'd leave their home, I'd just think it was really a privilege to meet them, but you've never met two happier people. So positive. So their story is they met shortly after they survived the Holocaust, and they married a few months after they got out of the concentration camp, moved to Australia. They've set up life in Melbourne, have had a family. They've achieved so many great things, and I guess, I might have been having a bad day, but I'd often think about those two and think, wow, if they can, silly. There's obviously no comparison, but they're just two really inspiring people.